The galaxy has known fear before. It knew fear during the Wars of Expansion, when the Vrethian collective spread like a plague across 3 sectors. It knew fear when the Silent Ones came from the dark spaces beyond the Rim. And entire civilizations blinked out of existence in a matter of hours. But nothing in all of recorded history had prepared the known universe for the moment when a single child would become the most hunted entity alive. And when that universe would discover, far too late, the transmission reached the Valorian Council at precisely 0300 hours on a Tuesday that would change everything. A 10-year-old girl existed somewhere in the Kepler expanse, and she needed to die. Everything the Council did for the next 6 months would be geared toward achieving this single, seemingly simple objective. None of them would realize they were rushing toward an extinction event they could not possibly survive. The colony on Meridian 7 had been peaceful once. Sarah Chen remembered it that way. The rolling green meadows, the way the triple moons turned the night sky into a watercolor painting of purples and blues, the taste of fresh fruit from the orchards her mother had planted. She was 10 years old and had never known the true darkness of the universe. She was about to learn it in spectacular fashion. The attack came at dawn, not the gentle dawn of Meridian 7's equator, but the harsh, sudden illumination of plasma strikes that turned the residential sector into a furnace of flame and ash. Sarah had been practicing her violin when the first strike hit their home. The instrument flew from her hand, splintering against the far wall. For a moment she stared at the broken pieces, feeling nothing at all. Then her survival instincts, inherited from a bloodline she didn't yet understand, kicked in. She moved. No hesitation, no panic, just movement. Through the kitchen, toward the back exit, past her mother who was still trying to reach her father on the communication system. Marcus Chen's reply was crackling back through the speaker when Sarah pushed open the door. "I'm coming home," he said, his voice calm, steady, containing within it a certainty that the universe would bend to his will. "I'm always coming home." Those words saved her life. The evacuation shuttles were already lifting off when Sarah made it to the landing platform, clinging to the back of a transport vessel with a dozen other refugees. From her precarious position, she watched as the invasion force descended from the sky. They were beautiful and terrible. The Valorian ships, gleaming metallic constructs that moved with an alien grace, their weapon systems cutting through the atmosphere like thoughts made real. But what Sarah heard, before she even saw the invasion force itself, was the sound that would haunt her nightmares for the rest of her life. It was the sound of her father's fighter craft igniting its engines. Marcus Chen had been stationed 2 systems away when the distress call came through. By the time he received it, Meridian 7 was already burning. He had exactly 19 minutes before the colony's military defense systems would be overrun. Most pilots would have calculated odds, run probabilities, accepted the mathematical reality of what they faced. Most pilots were not Marcus Chen. His small vessel, barely more than a glorified fighter with a jury-rigged weapons array, crossed the distance between stars in times that defied the conventional physics of faster-than-light travel. He didn't know how he did it. He had never been able to explain it to the military engineers who had tried to reverse engineer his modifications. But there was something about Marcus Chen's mind that seemed to work on a frequency different from everyone else around him. He understood systems at a level that was almost intuitive. He could make machines do things they were not designed to do. He could make them sing. By the time he reached Meridian 7, 47 of his sister colonies' population had already been killed. The Valorian forces had swept through the lower residential sectors with brutal efficiency, their ground troops moving with the coordination of a single organism. They were looking for something specific. The military intelligence reports later revealed what they sought: a 10-year-old girl. The reports never did explain why. Marcus cut through their formation like a scythe through wheat. His weapons fire was imprecise by military standards, wasteful by any sane calculation. But there was an artistry to it that transcended conventional warfare. His shots didn't just disable the Valorian units, they dismantled them, turning their own shields and armor against them, creating chain reactions that cascaded through their formations. Within 12 minutes, he had rendered the invasion force inoperable. The Valorian commander made a decision that would echo through history. "Extract," he commanded, his mandibles clicking with what might have been anger or might have been fear. "Extract now. Bad. Full retreat. Mark this world as hostile." As the Valorian ships climbed back into the atmosphere, beginning their retreat to whatever dark corner of space they had emerged from, Marcus Chen brought his fighter down at the evacuation platform. He moved like a man possessed, checking each refugee for injury, searching each face. When he found his wife, Elena, her arm burned and her eyes streaming with tears, he held her close. When he found his daughter clinging to the hull of a transport vessel with bleeding hands, something inside him crystallized into absolute, unshakable purpose. Sarah saw her father for the first time since the attack, and she saw in his eyes a depth of fury that scared her more than the Valorian invasion ever could. It was not the anger of a moment. It was the settled, patient anger of a man who had been given a target and would pursue it until the entire universe learned to fear his name. "It's okay, sweetheart," he whispered, holding her close, stroking her hair as the evacuation shuttles began their ascent. "I've got you now. Nothing will ever hurt you again. I promise you that." What he didn't say, what he would only reveal much later, was that he meant it literally. That the promise wasn't just a father's desperate reassurance, but a statement of simple, absolute fact. The Valorian collective learned this fact slowly, then very quickly, then all at once. The investigation that followed the Meridian 7 attack was supposed to be routine. A small colony destroyed, civilian losses regrettable but acceptable, the invading force repelled by a single trained pilot. Remarkable, yes, but not unprecedented. The galaxy had seen heroes before. It would see them again. But then the Valorian collective released a formal demand. The child, called Sarah Chen, the transmission stated in its crystalline, emotionless way, will be surrendered for custody to the Valorian collective within 30 solar cycles. This is non-negotiable. Failure to comply will result in the systematic elimination of all human worlds. This is not a threat. This is a certainty. It was Marcus Chen who understood what the demand meant. He had access to files that others did not, to histories that had been sealed for reasons of security. When he read the ultimatum, everything fell into place. The genetic testing his daughter had undergone at birth, the quiet inquiry that had come from the colonial registry, asking about her specific genetic markers, the way the medical personnel had seemed disappointed by her results, muttering something about dormant genes before returning to routine. Marcus understood, in that moment, what his daughter represented, not just to the Valorian collective, but to the entire structure of interstellar society. He understood why they wanted her, and he understood, with a cold certainty that made his hand shake, what would happen if they got her. He began to plan. The human military command received his resignation with a mixture of relief and concern. Marcus Chen, they reasoned, would take his daughter and disappear into some far colony, fade into history as just another casualty of the constant expansion of the galaxy. They were wrong. But they wouldn't realize their mistake until it was far too late. Marcus took his wife and his daughter to a place that had been abandoned for nearly 50 years, the old research facility on Kepler Station 7, a vast installation floating in the dead space between major trade routes. It was here, in the silence of the void, that he began the work that would define his legacy and reshape the entire understanding of what humanity was capable of achieving. He did not do it alone. Over the course of 3 months, he reached out carefully to others like himself, people who had always been considered anomalies, outliers, glitches in the system. A woman on Europa who could interfere with digital systems just by thinking about them. A man on Mars who had survived radiation exposure that should have killed him 1,000 times over. A child on Titan who could predict quantum fluctuations with an accuracy that the greatest supercomputers could not match. Each of them had lived their entire lives knowing they were different, knowing that they existed at the margins of normalcy. None of them had understood why. Marcus showed them why. Humanity isn't declining, he told them, standing before the assembled group in the great central chamber of the research facility. We're evolving. We're being hunted because they're afraid of what we're becoming. The Valorian collective, the Threll Empire, all of them, they've dominated this galaxy for so long that they can't imagine anything threatening their hegemony. But we are. We will. He introduced them to the neuroarrays he had constructed, technology that should have been impossible, that violated a dozen different laws of known physics. He showed them how to link their consciousness with the systems around them, how to extend their awareness beyond the normal bounds of the human body. He taught them that being human was not a limitation. It was a unique gift that every other species in the galaxy lacked. And then he taught them how to be weapons. The Valorian collective's demand reached its deadline 6 months after it was issued. The human government, terrified of species-wide extinction, prepared to surrender the child. They expected Marcus Chen to fight this decision. They expected him to go to the media, to appeal to the public, to do something to prevent his daughter from being turned over to alien custody. They did not expect him to broadcast his message to every human settlement in the galaxy at the exact moment when the Valorian delegation was supposed to arrive to collect his daughter. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said, his voice calm and measured, speaking into cameras that seemed to capture not just his image but something deeper, some essential quality of his being. "I am a human being. I have been many things in my life: a soldier, an engineer, a father. Today, I am the thing that the Valorian Collective has been afraid of since the moment it realized what we are capable of becoming." Behind him, the research facility hummed with power. Kepler Station 7, dormant for 50 years, suddenly blazed back to life. Its systems, ancient but revitalized by Marcus's understanding of technology that surpassed even the modern cutting edge, began a cascade of broadcasting that reached across 3 sectors of space. "You have hunted my daughter," Marcus continued, his eyes boring into the camera with an intensity that made billions of viewers feel as if he was speaking directly to them. "You hunted her because you were afraid of what she might become. You were right to be afraid." The Valorian delegation, approaching the rendezvous point, suddenly found their communication systems flooded with data. Not a virus, not a hack, but a complete and total overwhelming of their capacity to receive information. Their weapons systems began to turn inward. Their navigation computers started charting courses directly into stars. Their shields, that had protected them from the most devastating attacks in galactic history, simply shut down. And floating in the space where the rendezvous was supposed to happen, a small girl's voice could be heard singing, not in any human language, but in a language of mathematics and light, of quantum mechanics and probability, of everything that made the universe function at its deepest level. Sarah Chen was singing the language of reality itself, and as she sang, the fabric of the galaxy bent to listen. The Valorian delegation, unable to escape, unable to fight, could only transmit one final message before their ships were disabled. What are they? The answer would come not from Marcus Chen, but from the scientific community that began the real investigation the moment the Valorian delegation went silent. What they discovered would shake the foundations of everything they believed about human existence. Humanity was not a species that had evolved on a single planet and spread across the stars. Humanity was something far older, far more fundamental. They were the remnants of something that the oldest species in the galaxy had thought had been eliminated millions of years ago. A species that had not just lived, but had thrived, had advanced, had reached heights of technological and spiritual understanding that had terrified every other civilization so completely that they had united across all their ancient rivalries to wipe them out. They had almost succeeded, but they had left behind a seed. On a planet called Earth in a quiet solar system at the edge of known space, that seed had taken root. It had grown. It had learned to hide. And now, after millions of years, it was beginning to remember what it had once been. Marcus Chen was not the deadliest weapon humanity had ever created. He was the awakening of a memory that the galaxy had tried to forget. And his daughter, the girl they had targeted, was the proof that the weapon was no longer dormant. The universe would never be the same. The age of human submission was over. The age of human dominion was just beginning. And somewhere in the deep silence of space, other voices, voices that had been silent for millions of years, began to wake up and listen to the song of their returning kin.